By the mid-1960s, American auto factories were building more cars than any industry in the history of the world. By 1980, millions of Americans had stopped buying them. The factories didn't close overnight. The quality left first. Picture a morning in 1964. You're standing on the assembly line at a General Motors plant in Flint, Michigan. The shift starts at 6. By 6:01, the line is moving. A bare steel frame rolls past you every 60 seconds, and your job is to make sure every bolt on the left front suspension is torqued to spec. You've done this 300 times a day, 5 days a week for 7 years. You know the sound a properly tightened bolt makes. You know by feel when something is off. The man across from you has been here longer. He can hear a misaligned panel from 10 feet away. That kind of knowledge didn't come from a manual, it came from time. From doing the same thing thousands of times until your hands knew more than your head did. The American auto worker in the early 1960s was, by most measures, the most productive manufacturing worker on the planet. And the cars that came off those lines reflected it. A 1965 Impala was not a complicated machine by modern standards. Rear-wheel drive, a V8 or a straight 6, a body bolted to a frame. No computers, no sensors, no electronics to speak of. But what it had was fit. The doors closed with a particular weight to them. The chrome was straight. The gaps between the panels were even. When you ran your hand along the fender, it was smooth. Not because a robot made it that way, but because a man who'd been doing bodywork for 15 years wouldn't let it leave any other way. That standard was personal. It lived in the hands of the people on the line. And through the 1950s and into the early 1960s, it held. The American car was not perfect. It rusted. It drank gasoline. The engineering was conservative by European standards, but the build quality, the physical act of putting the thing together, was a point of pride. A man could point to a car in a parking lot and say, "I built that," and he meant it literally. What changed wasn't one thing. It was a series of things that happened close together, and each one made the next one worse. The first was speed. Through the 1960s, the pressure to increase production volume grew steadily. The American market was booming. Families wanted second cars. The muscle car era created enormous demand for performance models. The factories responded by pushing the line faster. When the line moves faster, the time each worker has to complete their task shrinks. What had been 60 seconds became 50, then 45. The work didn't get simpler, the time just got shorter. When a worker couldn't finish a task properly before the next frame arrived, he had a choice. Stop the line, which meant lost production and angry supervisors, or let it go. Send it down the line and hope someone caught it later. More and more often, no one did. The second was labor relations. By the late 1960s, the relationship between the auto workers and the companies had turned bitter. The work was repetitive, physically demanding, and increasingly fast. The UAW had won good wages and benefits, but the conditions on the floor were grinding. Younger workers coming in didn't carry the same loyalty to the company that the older generation had. They saw the job for what it had become: monotonous, loud, and relentless. Absenteeism rose. On Mondays and Fridays at some plants, as many as 1 in 5 workers didn't show up. The ones who did were covering for the ones who didn't, doing unfamiliar tasks at full speed. The cars built on Mondays and Fridays became a running joke in America. Never buy a Monday car. That joke told you everything. The public had started to notice. The third was management. Through the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Detroit's leadership made a series of decisions that prioritized cost-cutting over build quality. Cheaper materials replaced more durable ones. Interior plastics that cracked in the sun. Paint that faded within 3 years. Bumpers that rusted through in northern winters. The engineering wasn't necessarily worse on paper, but the execution, the materials chosen, the tolerances allowed, the corners cut, told a different story. The accountants had more say than the engineers, and the engineers had more say than the men on the line. The worker who could hear a misaligned panel, nobody was asking him anymore. Then the imports arrived. In the early 1970s, Japanese cars began appearing on American roads in real numbers. The Toyota Corolla, the Datsun 510, the Honda Civic. They were small, they were simple, and they were built with a precision that embarrassed Detroit. The panel gaps were tight. The paint was consistent. The doors closed cleanly every time. These weren't luxury cars, they were economy cars, and they were put together better than most of what was coming out of Michigan. The difference wasn't just technique, it was philosophy. Japanese manufacturers had adopted quality control systems, many of them ironically taught by American engineers like W. Edwards Deming, that treated every defect as a system failure, not a worker failure. When something went wrong on a Toyota line, the line stopped. The problem was found, the process was fixed. In Detroit, when something went wrong, the line kept moving. The problem was patched at the end, or it wasn't patched at all. By the mid-1970s, the reputation gap was becoming impossible to ignore. Consumer Reports began documenting what millions of owners already knew. American cars were developing more problems in the first year of ownership than their Japanese counterparts. Doors that didn't align, electrical systems that failed, engines that leaked oil from the factory. The phrase planned obsolescence had been around since the 1950s, but by the 1970s, it didn't feel like a strategy anymore. It felt like an excuse. The 1970s also brought new federal regulations, emission standards, safety requirements. These were necessary and overdue, but Detroit treated them as burdens rather than engineering challenges. The catalytic converters bolted onto existing engines strangled performance. The early emission systems were unreliable. Rather than redesigning from the ground up, the factories added components to designs that hadn't been conceived with them in mind. The cars got heavier, slower, and less dependable. The workers building them knew it. The people buying them knew it. What left the factory in those years wasn't just a lesser product. It was a broken contract. For decades, the American car had represented something specific, that ordinary people could own something well-made, something built by someone who cared whether it was right. When that stopped being true, people didn't just switch brands, they lost something they couldn't quite name. The pride that had lived on the factory floor, in the hands of the man who checked every bolt, in the woman who inspected every seam, didn't disappear because those people changed. It disappeared because the system around them changed. The line got faster, the materials got cheaper, the management got more distant. And one by one, the people who knew what a properly built car felt like either retired, quit, or stopped fighting for it. If you ever rode in a car your father bought new in 1964, you remember how the door sounded when it closed. Heavy. Solid. Like it meant something. If you rode in one he bought in 1974, you remember something different. And you remember the look on his face when he noticed it too. That was the moment. Not a single date on a calendar, but a slow recognition, repeated in driveways across the country, that something had changed and wasn't coming back. If that brought back something you recognize, go ahead and like the video. It helps more people find us. And if you haven't subscribed to The Factory Floor yet, now's a good time. Every video, we go inside the factories and assembly lines that built the things America grew up with, and try to understand not just what they made, but what happened when they stopped making it well. Leave a comment below. Tell us what your family drove, what year, and when you first noticed the quality wasn't the same. We read everyone.